Welcome, chosen ones. They're watching, closer than you think, closer than they'll ever admit. Right now, someone is scrolling through your life, and they can't help but feel unsettled by your authenticity. It's not just about the moves you're making, it's the way you make them. You're like a beacon, drawing people in, and while they might not interact, they're tuned in, watching, learning from your every move. The reason? Your growth is a silent force, a reminder of everything they've left behind, the dreams, the risks, the courage they never had. And as you continue to rise, your authenticity is setting the stage for something bigger. You're building a future so powerful that even robots would tremble at your influence. Your journey is something they can't look away from, because it's a narrative they wish they could write themselves. Yet they never had the courage to pick up the pen. But you're forging ahead. No apologies, no fear. You're taking control of your destiny, and soon you'll be leading with the precision and power of the very tools they once thought were beyond reach. In the world you're creating, you're not just taking over, you're transforming. You're showing them a version of themselves that they didn't know existed. The one who takes risks, leads with conviction, and doesn't apologize for their light. Your path is not just about success, it's about rewriting the script entirely. And while they keep watching from the sidelines, wondering how you do it, you're already preparing for the next chapter. You're equipped with everything you need: authenticity, courage, and soon enough, the world will be watching your rise, knowing that no one, not even robots, can stop you. This is where the tension begins. On one hand, they admire you for it. The confidence, the freedom, the audacity to be exactly who you are. It's magnetic, it's inspiring. But on the other hand, that same authenticity stirs something uncomfortable. It reminds them of the masks they wear and the compromises they've made. And that's not easy to sit with. Suddenly, the excuses that once felt valid start sounding hollow. The reasons they gave themselves for not chasing their goals don't hold up as well when they're faced with someone proving that it's possible. That internal tug-of-war is why their reactions are so mixed. Some people will cheer you on openly, seeing your growth as proof that they can break free too. Others will watch quietly from the sidelines, torn between admiration and envy because your success highlights the gaps in their own story. And then, there are those who will downplay your achievements or act indifferent, not because they don't care, but because acknowledging your growth means confronting their own stagnation. The irony? Half the time, they're not even aware of this inner conflict. All they know is that something about you makes them feel a little restless, a little more aware of what they've been avoiding. But whether they clap or criticize, their reaction isn't really about you. It's about what your presence reveals within them. And the truth is, that mirror doesn't lie. That's why they keep watching. Because deep down, a part of them wonders what their life might look like if they had the courage to step into their own authenticity too. Number 2, you break the illusion of conformity. Most people move through life trying to fit into a mold, blending in, playing it safe, and following the script society handed them. It's comfortable, predictable, easy. But when you show up as your authentic self, that script starts to crack. You become living proof that there's another way to live, a way that doesn't involve shrinking to make others comfortable. And that's where things get complicated. Your presence challenges the status quo. Suddenly, the unspoken rules everyone follows without question don't seem so unbreakable. You wear what you want, say what you mean, and chase what lights you up. There's no filter, no performance, no watered-down version of who you are. And that freedom? It's both captivating and confronting. Because while part of them admires your courage, another part wonders why they're still playing by rules that no longer serve them. It's not just what you do, it's what you represent. Your authenticity holds up a mirror to their own choices, making them question the masks they wear to fit in. Maybe it's the job they hate but won't leave, the opinions they swallow to avoid rocking the boat, or the dreams they've shelved because they're afraid of failing. Seeing you break free from those invisible chains forces them to confront the ones they've wrapped around themselves. And that realization, it's uncomfortable. That's why their reactions can be so mixed. One minute they're drawn to your energy, inspired by the way you own your space without seeking permission. The next, they're picking apart your choices or questioning your success. Because if you can live outside the lines, it raises the question, why can't they? And admitting that the only thing holding them back is fear. That's a truth most people aren't ready to face. So they watch from a distance, torn between cheering you on and presenting what your freedom exposes within them. But whether they envy or admire you, one thing's certain. Your authenticity has shifted something inside them. And once that shift happens, there's no going back. Because deep down, they know you didn't just break the mold. You proved they never needed one in the first place. People fear what they don't understand. It's wired into human nature. When someone breaks the mold and refuses to follow the script, it unsettles those still clinging to it. Your authenticity doesn't just stand out, it disrupts the norm. And when people can't categorize or predict you, they don't know how to react. Part of them admires the freedom you found, but another part feels threatened because you represent everything they've been told to avoid. Standing out, taking risks, and not needing approval to validate your worth. It's not that they dislike you. They're unsettled by what you represent. You challenge their beliefs without saying a word. Your presence alone asks questions they'd rather not answer. Why do they seek validation? Why do they silence parts of themselves to fit in? Why do they follow rules that don't make them happy? These questions sit beneath the surface, unspoken, but impossible to ignore when they see you thriving without those limitations. And that's where the fear comes in. Not fear of you, but fear of what your authenticity forces them to confront within themselves. People like predictability. It makes life feel safe. When someone steps outside the lines, it exposes the fact that the lines were never real to begin with. They were just comfortable guidelines people convinced themselves they had to follow. Your refusal to play by those rules makes others question why they ever did. And that's not an easy pill to swallow. It's easier to label you as too much or different than to admit they've been holding themselves back. But here's the twist. That fear is often mixed with fascination. They can't look away because part of them craves the freedom you found. They watch closely, sometimes in silence, sometimes with criticism, but always watching. Your ability to live unapologetically chips away at their carefully built walls. And deep down, they wonder what their life could look like if they had the courage to do the same. Whether they show it or not, your presence leaves a mark. Because once they've seen someone break free from fear, the excuses holding them back don't seem as solid anymore. Number 4, your success feels personal to them. Your success doesn't just inspire people, it unsettles them. Not because they want you to fail, but because your achievements force them to question the stories they've told themselves for years. They believe that success came with sacrifice, trading passion for stability, authenticity for approval, and freedom for security. But then you showed up, thriving on your own terms, and suddenly, their carefully built logic doesn't hold up the way it used to. Every milestone you hit feels like a silent challenge to the choices they've made. They see you winning without playing by the rules they've followed their whole lives, and it stirs something deep inside them. It's not jealousy in the traditional sense. It's more personal than that. Your success makes them wonder if they settled too soon, if they played it too safe, or if they compromised too much along the way. And once that question takes root, it's hard to shake. That's why their reactions are rarely straightforward. Some will cheer you on openly, inspired by the proof that it's possible to succeed without betraying yourself. Others will watch quietly from the sidelines, unsure whether to admire your courage or resent the mirror your success holds up to their lives. And then, there are those who will downplay your achievements, not because they don't see your greatness, but because acknowledging it would mean admitting that they could have chosen differently too. But here's the thing, their feelings have nothing to do with you. You didn't take anything from them. You simply showed them what was possible. And that's a hard truth to sit with, especially for those who've spent years believing that success only comes through conformity and compromise. Your journey rewrites the narrative, proving that you can have both success and authenticity. And for some, that realization is both liberating and unsettling. So, if you've ever wondered why people from your past watch your growth with mixed emotions, this is why. It's not just about what you've achieved. It's about what your success represents, the possibility of living life on your terms without apology or permission. And that truth is impossible to ignore, no matter how quietly they watch. Number 5, you highlight their untapped potential. Your authenticity doesn't just turn heads, it turns minds inward. When people see you thriving as your true self, it forces them to confront the space between who they are and who they could be. It's like a spotlight on their untapped potential, shining on the parts of themselves they've neglected or buried. They start to wonder, what if I stopped holding back? What if I chased the dreams I've been shelving? What if I lived without fear of judgment? This realization is both inspiring and unsettling. On one hand, seeing someone else unlock their potential proves that more is possible. It sparks that deep, restless feeling, the sense that they too have something greater inside them waiting to be unleashed. But on the other hand, that awareness comes with a heavy truth. The only thing standing between them and their best self is their own fear, doubt, and hesitation. And that's where the tension begins. Your growth becomes a measuring stick, not because you're competing with them, but because your success highlights what they've yet to step into. It's not about what you have or what you've accomplished. It's about what you represent, a version of themselves they haven't yet had the courage to become. Every risk you take, every goal you reach, and every moment you stand firm in your authenticity serves as a reminder of what they could achieve if they stopped holding themselves back. This internal tug-of-war is why their reactions can be so mixed. Some people will be genuinely inspired, using your success as proof that their own growth is possible. Others will watch from a distance, torn between cheering you on and feeling the sting of comparison. And a few might try to downplay your success, not because they don't see your potential, but because acknowledging it makes their own untapped greatness harder to ignore. But the truth is, their feelings have little to do with you. You didn't create the gap, they did. Your authenticity simply made it impossible for them to look away. And whether they admire, envy, or struggle to understand you, one thing is certain. Your presence has sparked something in them. And once that spark is lit, it's not easy to put out. People like to put others into boxes. It makes life easier to understand. Predictability is comfortable because it gives them a sense of control. They know what to expect, how to respond, and where they stand in comparison. But when you show up as your authentic self, refusing to follow the script or fit neatly into a category, it throws them off balance. Suddenly, they can't predict your next move. And that unpredictability makes them uneasy. Your ability to move differently isn't just surprising, it's unsettling. You don't seek approval or play by the rules they've been taught to follow, and that freedom challenges their sense of order. They're used to people who conform, who follow the same patterns, and who play it safe. But you break those patterns without hesitation. One moment you're taking risks they wouldn't dare consider. The next you're succeeding in ways they never expected. And because they can't label or define you, they can't control how they feel about you. This unpredictability creates a sense of vulnerability. People rely on assumptions to navigate social interactions, and when those assumptions don't apply, it leaves them unsure of how to respond. Are you a threat to their status quo? A reminder of what they could be if they took more risks? Or simply someone they admire but can't quite figure out? The uncertainty is what makes them uncomfortable. It forces them to question their beliefs, their choices, and the limits they've placed on themselves. But their discomfort often manifests in subtle ways. They might downplay your success, criticize your methods, or dismiss your confidence as arrogance. Not because they dislike you, but because it's easier to judge what they don't understand than to confront the possibility that they're holding themselves back. Their need to label you stems from a desire to regain control, to put you in a box that makes sense within their worldview. But when you refuse to be defined, you force them to face the truth. The only thing standing between them and their own freedom is the fear of stepping outside the lines. And that realization is more unsettling than any unpredictable move you could ever make. Number 7, they crave your confidence, yet it intimidates them. Confidence is magnetic. It draws people in, whether they admit it or not. But here's the catch. When your confidence is grounded in authenticity, when it's not an act but a natural expression of who you are, it does more than attract attention. It holds up a mirror to the insecurities others try to hide. Suddenly, their self-doubt feels louder, more noticeable, and harder to ignore. And that's where the tension begins. They admire your confidence because it represents what they crave: the freedom to show up without fear of judgment, to own their strengths without downplaying them, and to navigate life without constantly second-guessing themselves. But that admiration is mixed with something heavier: the weight of their own unspoken fears. Every time they see you stand firm in who you are, it reminds them of the moments they've shrunk themselves to fit in. Every risk you take makes them question the opportunities they've let slip by. Your ability to walk into a room and own your space without seeking validation forces them to confront the ways they've held themselves back. This inner conflict creates a love-hate dynamic that can be hard to decipher. On one hand, they're drawn to your energy, hoping some of that confidence might rub off on them. On the other, your self-assurance makes their doubts feel more pronounced, stirring up feelings they'd rather not face. It's not that they dislike you. They dislike the way your presence amplifies their own internal struggles. So they watch, caught between rooting for you and resenting the reflection you cast. Some will cheer you on, using your confidence as inspiration to step into their own power. Others might distance themselves or find ways to downplay your success, not because they believe you're unworthy, but because acknowledging your confidence means confronting their lack of it. But here's the truth. Their reaction says more about their relationship with themselves than it does about you. Your confidence isn't the problem. It's the catalyst. It forces them to ask, if they can believe in themselves that deeply, why can't I? And once that question takes root, it's impossible to ignore, no matter how much they try. Number 8, your independence undermines their need for validation. Independence is a rare kind of power, the kind that doesn't need applause to feel whole. When you thrive without seeking permission or approval, it shakes people in ways they don't always understand. Society teaches most people to measure their worth through the eyes of others, chasing likes, praise, and recognition as proof they're enough. But then there's you, moving forward, thriving, and winning without waiting for anyone's validation. And that contrast, it stirs something deep. Your independence is a quiet rebellion against the rules they've built their identity around. While they're caught in the cycle of wondering if they're good enough, if they're liked, or if they fit in, you move with the freedom of someone who doesn't need those answers to keep going. And that freedom challenges their entire way of thinking. It makes them question whether the approval they've been chasing is worth as much as they thought, or if they've been holding themselves back for nothing. But questioning those beliefs isn't easy. Admitting that external validation isn't essential means confronting the fear of what might happen if they stop chasing it. It means asking themselves, who am I if no one's watching? And that's a question many people spend their whole lives avoiding. So when they see you living that truth, owning your choices without needing applause, it forces them to face the gap between their desire for freedom and their fear of standing alone. This is why their reactions are often so mixed. Part of them admires your independence, drawn to the strength that comes from knowing your worth without needing it confirmed by others. But another part feels exposed as if your freedom highlights the invisible chains they've chosen to wear. Some will cheer you on, hoping to find that freedom within themselves. Others might dismiss your choices or label you as distant or too different, not because they don't respect you, but because accepting your independence means admitting they've been seeking approval they never truly needed. In the end, their response isn't about you. It's about the questions your independence forces them to ask. The kind of questions that can't be ignored once they've been awakened. And whether they admire you, envy you, or struggle to understand you, one thing is clear. Your ability to thrive without validation leaves an impression they won't forget. Rejection is a fear that holds most people hostage. It shapes their choices, silences their opinions, and keeps them clinging to relationships, jobs, and identities that no longer serve them. The thought of standing alone without approval or belonging feels unbearable. But then there's you, moving through life without that fear, unshaken by the possibility of being misunderstood or left out. And that freedom is both captivating and confronting. Your lack of fear isn't arrogance, it's clarity. You know that rejection isn't a reflection of your worth. It's simply a sign that certain spaces, people, or opportunities weren't aligned with you. While others exhaust themselves trying to fit into places that drain them, you walk away without hesitation. And that courage forces people to question their own dependence on acceptance. They wonder, if I can stand alone and still thrive, why am I so afraid of losing approval? This realization stirs up mixed emotions. On one hand, they admire your strength. Watching you move forward without needing constant reassurance is proof that life doesn't end when approval is withheld. It often begins. But on the other hand, your independence highlights the invisible chains they've wrapped around themselves. The fear of being judged, excluded, or unloved. Every time you take a risk without fearing rejection, it reminds them of the chances they've avoided because they were too afraid to hear no. This creates a love-hate dynamic they might not even understand. They're drawn to your freedom because it represents the life they wish they could live. Yet that same freedom exposes the limits they've placed on themselves. It's easier to label you as fearless or different than to admit they've been holding themselves back. But deep down, they know your strength isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear dictate your choices. So they watch, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with envy, but always with a sense of wonder. Because your ability to stand alone isn't just a testament to your strength. It's a reminder that the life they want is waiting on the other side of their fear. And whether they embrace that truth or resist it, they can't deny the power of what you represent. Number 10. They're drawn to your truth but fear its consequences. Honesty is a double-edged sword. It cuts through illusions and reveals what people would rather keep hidden. When you live your truth without sugar-coating your thoughts or diluting your identity, it commands respect, but it also stirs fear. People admire your authenticity because it represents the freedom to be fully yourself. But that admiration comes with an unsettling question. What would I have to lose if I did the same? For many, the idea of embracing their truth feels risky. It threatens the stability they've built on half-truths and compromises, smiling when they don't mean it, agreeing to things they resent, or hiding parts of themselves to avoid judgment. Their careers might depend on playing it safe. Their relationships might be built on avoiding difficult conversations, and their social status might rely on blending in rather than standing out. So when they see you thriving without those limitations, it forces them to confront a harsh reality. The comfort they cling to comes at the cost of their authenticity. This is where the tension begins. Your honesty acts like a mirror, reflecting the part of themselves they've muted to fit in. Every time you speak your mind or live unapologetically, it reminds them of the words they've swallowed and the dreams they've shelved. They admire your courage because it shows them what's possible, but they also fear what that freedom might cost: judgment, rejection, or losing the acceptance they've worked so hard to maintain. That's why their reactions can be so complex. Some will praise your honesty, hoping it inspires them to be more truthful in their own lives. Others might criticize or distance themselves from you, not because they disagree with your truth, but because it makes their own compromises harder to ignore. Even those who admire you from afar might hesitate to follow your path, unsure if they're ready to face the consequences of living without a filter. But what they often miss is the cost of not embracing their truth, the weight of pretending, the relationships built on false versions of themselves, and the quiet regret of knowing they never fully showed up as who they are. And, as much as they might fear the consequences of honesty, your example plants a seed, the realization that living a life true to yourself, no matter the cost, is the only way to truly be free. Number 11. Your growth exposes their stagnation. Growth is a silent challenge. When you evolve mentally, emotionally, or professionally, it forces those around you to question the pace of their own lives. They see you breaking old patterns, stepping into new spaces, and becoming more of who you're meant to be. And while part of them wants to celebrate your progress, another part feels the sting of comparison. Your growth isn't just inspiring, it's a reminder of the changes they've postponed and the dreams they've put on hold. It's human nature to measure ourselves against others, especially those we've known the longest. When you level up, it shifts the dynamic. The person they once knew, the one they could relate to, predict, or even feel superior to, no longer fits neatly into the role they assigned you. Suddenly, the gap between where you are and where they remain becomes harder to ignore. And that gap creates a tension they can't shake. Your success highlights their stagnation in ways that feel uncomfortably personal. Every risk you take reminds them of the chances they've avoided. Every milestone you hit makes their own delays harder to justify. It's not that they don't want you to win, they do. But your evolution forces them to confront the question they've been avoiding. Why haven't I moved forward too? This internal conflict explains why their reactions are often so mixed. Some will cheer you on, using your growth as motivation to reignite their own ambition. Others, however, might withdraw, criticize, or downplay your success, not out of malice, but because your progress feels like proof that their excuses no longer hold weight. Even those who love you most may struggle to reconcile their pride in your achievements with the discomfort of seeing their own inertia reflected back at them. But here's the truth. Your growth isn't about them. You didn't move forward to leave anyone behind. You did it to honor your potential. If your progress exposes their stagnation, it's not a judgment. It's an invitation. An invitation to question their limits, challenge their comfort zones, and step into the version of themselves they've been postponing. Whether they accept that invitation is their choice. But either way, your growth has sparked a shift they can no longer ignore.